Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Professor Oleander, and this is Run 8 Train Simulator, the ultimate train simulator, the greatest train simulator that's ever been invented. Play this game, and you are an engineer. Not really, but it would be so cool if that's how it really worked. We have done a few videos of this game. I have got to say that I really love it. I picked this game up when it, not when it came out, but not long after it came out, maybe a year or so later. Have not looked back. I have all of the add-ons for it. There are 5 routes now for it. You have the Mojave and Barstow, you have Bakersfield, then you have Needles and Cajon, and then the CSX A-line, and the newly released Selkirk line, which is out of Selkirk, New York, and again another CSX line. For the love of God, make another train route that is something other than CSX or BNSF-UP. It would be very nice to see some of the old Norfolk and Western lines or something like that, but enough about that. So we are in this wonderful little train simulator. This was made by 3D Studios, which is the they started out as modders for Microsoft Train Simulator, which was Genesis in terms of train simulators. For the longest time, that was like the benchmark. That was the standard of what a train simulator should be, because they put a lot of work into that game. It was very popular, and Microsoft was going to make the sequel, which was going to be the aptly named Microsoft Train Simulator 2. I can't remember the exact reason why the funding got cut for it, but the project ended up getting scrapped, and because 3D Studios was already working on mods for it, they decided in 2009 to go ahead and create their own game, and that's where Run 8 Train Simulator came from. So really, if Microsoft Train Simulator 2 had been made, it would look something very, very similar to this. Now let's go up here and get a bird's eye view of everything. It's kind of empty. This is the Mojave Desert. You know, this is sort of old school graphics, but you know, you look at it from up here and you say, well, that looks like crap, and then you really think about it, and if you're in the cab of a locomotive, this is what you're going to be looking at, and it's actually not that bad. You know, passing glance going 60 miles an hour, it's going to be just fine. Now I will say this: the CSXA line is green. That was the big joke whenever it first came out, was, oh my God, there's actually green in the world. And that's because the Mojave, it's a desert, so it's a lot of brown sand. You know, some tumbleweeds, a little bit of green here and there, but the A-line is almost green from head to toe. It's so weird, because you get used to playing out here in the desert, and then you finally get somewhere where it's actually got trees and stuff like that, and it's odd. So the Selkirk line is an awesome line. I've run on it some, and it's very, very beautiful. I'll have to make another video about it. I was going to make one, and just I'm still not familiar with the route, so I haven't done a whole lot. I wanted to make one on the A-line too, but I was having some issues. The A-line is awesome because it's very easy to get a train that can run track speed, and so you can get into Run 8 and be running 60 miles an hour or so, so it's kind of cool. You can do that on here, but the grades on these routes are fairly unforgiving. There's some 2s and some 3%, and you know, this game is like running a train. The physics are spot on. I've mentioned this before on the other channel. I know I haven't mentioned it on this one because I haven't done anywhere I'm talking. I haven't done any videos where I'm talking to you guys, but I am a locomotive engineer. I'm also a mechanic, and a mechanic to an extent, I should say. But I can do some I can do repairs on these engines if I needed to. I run an engine that's very similar to this one. This is an SD40-2, which is a special duty. See there, SD40-2. This is a -2 type locomotive. There's some GP 40-2s, that Rio Grande engine right there, that's GP40. It's a general purpose, which is a 4-axle locomotive, and then the rest of our SD40s right there, and then we have some ES44s, which are these guys. See, it says ES44 DC electric current going to the traction motors. There is an AC version of this that uses alternating current. These are GEs, so I try not to look at them any more than I have to. I'm an EMD guy. Sorry, I had something caught in my throat, but I'm an EMD kind of guy. General Motors knew how to make an engine. If I had my choice, because steam has always been my first love, I've worked on steamers, and you know, they're very, very brute machines, very, very powerful machines. If I had to pick locomotives to replace steam, EMD is going to be right there with them, because I swear to you, the things work like steam locomotives. So, that being said, I can't even remember where I was going with that, but yeah, I run a locomotive that's similar to this. I run a GP7, which is the same style of locomotive. It's actually got dynamic braking in it, believe it or not. But these locomotives have not changed in appearance over the years. That GP7 was built in 1950. This locomotive was built in 1970 something. And even the newer locomotives, the SD50s and the 60s, don't look a whole lot different. Now the 60s you can get with the the American safety cab, which is the cab that's very similar to the ones that are here on the ES44s. This is I think this is usually referred to as the Spartan cab. There's varying debate. A lot of people call these hood units. I still call these things cab units because it's got a cab like an F unit usually does, or an E unit. But these are called road switchers. They're mainly made for slow speed work, or you know, not pulling very, very heavy trains, because they don't have the weight that these guys over here do. These are mainline engines. These are the long distance haulers. These are guys who are made to go in between different states, you know, hundreds and hundreds of miles at a time, whereas these guys are mainly used for locals. And yes, these are Norfolk Southern engines, and yes, I named them Jake and Elwood after the Blues Brothers. Get over it. Just kidding. These are I like Norfolk Southern. It's got a special place in my heart. I know a lot of people that work for Norfolk Southern. If I had to work for a Class 1 railroad, and I do not work for a Class 1 railroad before anybody asks, if I had to work for one, it would be NS. So, hint, hint, wink, wink. Great railroad. It was formed by two of the major railroads in the southeast, which was the Southern Railway and the Norfolk and Western Railway. Norfolk and Western Railway was known for their very powerful steam locomotives, the A-class, the J-class, and then the Y-class locomotives. Top-notch place. Ran into some financial trouble back in the 80s. That's what prompted the merger between Southern and N&W. But Norfolk Southern, still a great railroad to work for. Most of the people that I know that work for NS love their job. A lot of people that I know that work for BNSF too. Both of these railroads I've heard often referred to as, you know, a railroader's railroad, where the employees are kind of, you know, they run the show. Everybody pulls together, which is the way that railroads should be. So let's get into this. Let's get some stuff moving. What I figured we would do today is a little bit of switching. I don't think I'm really going to get out onto the line. I might spawn a train and get out there. I doubt I'm going to pull anything out of the yard. This is a yard in Barstow that I've been working on, just kind of building trains and whatever. The way I run this simulator is this is virtually my railroad, and I can do with it whatever the hell I want to. I don't run prototypical trains, and the reason for that is because it can take, and let me pull up the map here. This is our dispatcher screen. To go from Barstow, which is over here, down to Needles will take you about 3 hours. if you run it. This is 1-to-1 scale. As far as I know, this is 1-to-1 scale. So when you're going 60 miles an hour, you're really going 60 miles an hour. And if you have a heavy train and you're going over a grade and you're going 35 miles an hour, it's just like going 35 miles an hour on the railroad. So it's not scaled down in by any means. So that's one of the cool things about it. The train handling is awesome in this game, just from the train handling that I know from the work that I do. These engines load. I mean, it's like being in the seat, man. You know, you pull them, you start stretching the train out, and weird things happen. Give me a little sippy. But yeah, let's get some switching underway here. I was gonna say something else, and I can't remember. Oh, this game supports multiplayer. So if you can find a server, there's a few of them out there. I think one of the biggest one is Dams, which is Diverging and something server. I can't remember specifically. You can go to run8studios.com and it will have a list of active servers that are out there. There's several more. I don't play multiplayer anymore for a couple of reasons. The main one being that I don't have time. The other one being that most groups are pretty good about the people they let run. And this is for, well, I probably shouldn't say it, but I will say this as a railroader, and most of the guys that have been around the railroad, probably the guys that don't either, know that there are some people, we'll call them train enthusiasts. Some of them are a little bit more enthusiastic than others, and nothing wrong with that. God bless them. But you know, I like trains too, but I don't know everything about trains, and I don't try and tell everybody everything I know about trains. But I'll leave that there, and I hope that message got across, because I don't want to, I'm not trying to burn bridges, I'm not trying to upset anybody, but I'm just saying, go on multiplayer servers with that in mind. And again, I'm not saying that anybody that's on multiplayer servers is like that. You know, I'm sure everybody's just great people. I'm just saying, be aware there are people like that that are out there, and I'm going to leave it at that. So let's get this puppy started. We'll which engine do I want to run, Jake or Elwood? Let's do Elwood. So all I did to select that is just to click on it, and it will turn the engine red. This is the car that we are controlling, and you come up here with the rail unit options, and then we're going to hop inside the cab here. Love these cabs, love these locomotives. I love running these more than the big roads with the big cab units. Go ahead and put the independent brake all the way on. We'll come over here to our switches. We'll turn on the control switch. We'll turn on, well, we don't need to turn on. Just make sure that our isolation switch is on the start and isolate. We don't have to worry about the headlight control just yet. Now what you would do to start these locomotives, after you did that and all the breakers on the electrical cabinet were on, back here to this door, you would open that up. There's a switch in there, and you would turn it to the left, and that is the priming position. You'd let the fuel pump run for 10 seconds or so, let it prime. There's a sight glass on the other side. There's two filters that are on a little manifold, and one is the primary filter, and then the other one is a secondary filter in case the first one gets plugged up, in case it gets stopped up. Both of them have got a sight glass on top of them, so basically you would run it until that sight glass fills up on the first one, and then once it fills up, the engine is primed. You switch it over to, you turn the switch the other way to start, and then you just wait until it gets started. And we'll do that right now. We're just going to have to do it like this because we can't get up there to it. So we'll hit start. Get over here away from the noise. And one thing I didn't do, ever since they came up with the update that introduced the auto angle cockery, every time that I select these locomotives, I have to close the angle cocks on them, and it's annoying. If anybody from Run 8 is listening to that, it'd be nice if we could fix it. But just a little bit about these engines. These have got these are the 645 E3s, I believe, with turbocharged engines. I'm not even going to say horsepower because I can't remember it off the top of my head. It's over 2,000. I want to say it's 3, but I don't want to say anything without it. These over here, these are 4,400 horsepower units. These ES44s, that's why they're called ES44s. All of these, with the exception of the Norfolk Southern units, are 4,400 horsepower. The NS units are 4,000. And the reason for that is it's sort of the same mentality. You know, if you have two units that are 4,400 horsepower, and that gives you 8,800 horsepower, and one of them goes down, that cuts your horsepower in half. If you had a 4,000 horsepower unit, you needed the same one, you'd have to put 3. If you needed over 8,800, you would have to put 3 of those on there. And if one of them went down, you still had 8,000 horsepower. So that's kind of the mentality behind it. It's sort of what led to the downfall of the SD90s, which were the 6,000 horsepower units that EMD came up with. They had a bad problem with mechanical failures in the engines they put in them. And so if you had two of them together and one of them went down, which was fairly common with those engines, you lost half your horsepower, and more often than not, you couldn't make it. So it was better to run smaller to mid-size engines like these, as opposed to just a couple of really big engines. Because if you had a problem, then you had a train that was just stranded out there in the middle of nowhere. But these guys right here, these are pretty good workhorses. These 6 axles, they're good little switchers. That's why the railroads still use them. Most of the guys that run them love them. Let's go ahead and line some switches out here. Let's get over here so we can see. See, we want to reverse this switch, and that switch right down there, we want to normalize it. We're going to go into the bold tracks because we need to pull out some cars. Let's see, we want to normalize this switch, reverse this switch. Wrong switch. That switch. There we go. Now you see the points coming across. Let's go down here into the bowl tracks. We want to pull this cut of cars right here. These are the ones that are bound for Cadiz, which is right between Fenner and West Goffs. It's right in here. No. Well, it's down here. It's somewhere in this general vicinity here. It's actually down in here. I want to say it's right here. I'm not going to swear to it because it's not on the map, and I don't have the map in front of me. It's been a while since I've been down there. But it's down in this area. It's down towards Needles. There's a Y down there. I can't remember what that actually goes off to, what division that goes off to anyway. But all these are bound for Cadiz. These have been run over the hump. We've got some hoppers, a little bit of lag. That's just because I have a lot of cars loaded. It'll go away in just a second. couple box cars and a couple of hoppers. Not going to pull any tanks out just yet. We got some tankers right there, but I don't have any buffer cars to put up against them. So let's hop back in the cab here for a second. We'll turn the engine run switch on, which is the control for the throttle. This actually cuts out the control stand. We shouldn't be able to move anything, and actually we're not going to be able to anyway because I've still got this in isolate. Switch that over to run. Still not able to move. We switch this up, and now we can move it if we need to. One thing we need to do is come in between the cars here and connect the MU cable. There you see hear the brake stand equalizing out. These cables right here, these are the MU hoses. This is for the main reservoir, the independent, and then the actuation lever for the independent. These big cables that are, where are they? They're not here. They must be up here. Huh, that's right, they're not on here. But these are the MU ports. There's a cable that would run between here and here, and what that is it has a bundle of wires in it, and each wire is a separate control for inside of the control stand up here. So you'd have one for forward, one for neutral, one for reverse, one for every throttle position, one for every dynamic braking position, and just stuff like that. And those would be sent through to this engine. So this engine could be run as a MU, which is known as a multiple unit, or it could be run as a DPU if you wanted to. I could actually isolate this out and I control these locomotives independently. We're not going to do that in this one. We'll do it in another episode. Next thing I'm going to do is hop back up into the cab of this one. We're going to go ahead and set our headlight switch to short hood lead. Go ahead and get the rest of our breakers. We're going to leave the generator field isolated. We're not going to worry about the beacon because we don't have one. Set on our gauge lights. Set the headlight to bright. There you see we've got our disk lights on. We'll come back here. Since we can't get in the cab on this one, we'll just set this for long hood trail. I'm gonna hit the J key. That turns on the lights back here. And get up inside again. See that our parking brake is on. I'm going to hit F5. That knocks that off. That's why we're holding on the independent. You know, standard gauges right here, the main and the equalizing reservoir, the brake cylinder and the brake pipe, our flow gauge, and then our amp gauge. The yellow portion is for brake, and the green portion is for power. PCS, which is pneumatic control solenoid, that's if we go into emergency, which I can do that right now. That's emergency. And while we're in emergency, I'll go over the throttle positions, or the throttle. Not this. This is not the throttle. Don't think that's the throttle. Go into release. This is release, first service, or minimum reduction. All the way ahead to full service. This is application, 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 full service, suppression. Actually, that's handle off, I'm sorry. And then, what, did we go into emergency? I guess that was emergency. Let's go back into emergency for a second. Usually there's about a 15-second timer for the PCS to reset, and we'll just wait. While we're waiting, this little lever, this little knob right here, this is the cutout, and this is actually in the wrong position. These brakes should not be working right now because it's cut out. There is a tag right here. It says FRT, that stands for freight. Down below here you can see the letter P. If I come down here, you see out, freight, passenger. The freight position will allow you to make a reduction. This brake stand is called a 26L. This has a self-lapping, what's known as a self-lapping brake stand. The way the old brakes used to work, if you've seen my other video on the other channel about the FEF-3, it has an 8ET. And what you would do is you would bring the brake handle forward into the application area, you'd watch your gauge, you would take down however many pounds you wanted to, and then you would bring the handle back to lap. With this brake stand, you don't have to do that. From about right here to right here is the application area. So as you bring it forward, you can bring it forward a little bit and then stop, and then wherever that is in here, however many pounds that pull down, that's where it's going to stay. It'll lap itself. In the freight setting, you can move this handle forward and apply the brakes, but it doesn't matter how far you move it back until you go into release, it's going to hold the brake wherever you had it. So if you pull it forward halfway, let's call that 10 pounds, you can move the handle back and it will still be at 10 pounds. You can move it forward and it'll keep adding brake until you get up to full service, and then you can actually take more if you go into suppression. But the only way to bring the air off of it is you have to go into release. Now if you were to take this and turn it into, or switch it over to passenger, what would happen is you would apply, and then as you start backing off, coming back towards release, you can start backing off your brakes. So if you come up to 10 pounds and then you start moving the handle back, it'll go 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and then it'll come down to full release. That's the difference between the freight and passenger in a nutshell. The passenger gives you a graduated release, whereas the freight does not. You have to go into release in order to reset your brakes or to get any air that you've applied off. That's where you get into the condition known as pissing away your air, because if you take too much brake and you've got a really long train and then you go into release, because the cars will only charge if the brake handle is in the release position, if you're going back and forth, you're depleting the air that's on the cars, and once you don't have enough air to actually apply the brake cylinders, you can have a runaway situation. And it doesn't matter if you shoot them. Well, I take it back. The only way you can stop them is to shoot them, because the older cars have a split reservoir, so you have a service side and an emergency side. The emergency side is always charged at all times until you go into emergency. And it's like that so that if you have the brakes applied and then you get into a situation where you need emergency, you always have a full reservoir ready to go to the brake cylinder if you need it. So if you're thoroughly confused, you have my condolences. I'm not the greatest at explaining brakes. We could spend days going over it. So what we're going to do is everything should have had time to equalize out. To release, you see the PCS light went out, brake gauges came back up, flow meters down, we're good to go. We're going to turn on the generator field. Up down here, click on this one, make sure that we're in run. I'm going to work the ground here. Put it into, let me bring up this screen right here. So if we look up here at the top, you can see this is our status. This is where we're at right now. So we're notch 0, which is idle. Main reservoir is 135 pounds. Equalizer reservoir is 90. Brake pipe is 90. We don't have an EOT, so we're not worried about that. Flow is 2 cubic feet per minute, and 72 pounds on the brake cylinder. So we're going to go into reverse. Now these engines have a slow idle whenever they're centered, and then whenever you put them in the forward or reverse, they go to their regular idle. Let me hop up here in the cab for just a second. We're going to bring it out to notch 1. Notice that the amp meter is loading. We've loaded up to about 300 amps, which is what it's supposed to do. And it's It's very important that if you're in one of these locomotives and you're getting ready to move, you look at your amp meter to make sure it's charging, or to make sure that you're putting power down, because I cannot tell you how many times that I have almost knocked the brake off thinking that I had the gen field set, and look over at the amp gauge at the last minute and catch it. So it's always handy to look at your amp gauge, people. Alright, so we're ready to go. Let's hit the horn 3 times. One thing I will note, I always thought it was cool that the ditch lights on the CSX and NS locomotives alternate, which is what they do in real life. The way to turn them off is to hit the bell. The BNSF and the UP engines in this game do not do that, but I kind of like it. But I'm old school like that. So let's knock the brake off and get this thing out of here. For those of you that are curious, a single horn blast means a stop. That's just for everybody's information. Let me get back down here on the ground. That's why if you ever watching my videos, whenever I do a single horn blast, it means the locomotive is stopped. Put up our dispatcher screen. That one. Light turns green, track opens up. I'm going to pull forward now. And in all honesty, I wish that I could run these long hood forward, because NS and Southern were known for running these engines long hood forward because it was reminiscent of steam locomotives. It is also actually believed to be safer because you had all this meat ahead of you as opposed to little dinky hood. And one of the other things I wish they would do is make a high hood version, because Southern liked its high hoods. Alright, so let's put it in forward. 2 blasts. And load it and knock off the brake. And we're rolling. Go down into the bowl tracks here. I'm going to have to stop short so that way I can line the switch so we can grab that cut. One of the neat things about this one is it's got what's called, what is it called? Kidney busting cab motion, which means that the cab's going to rock back and forth. And if you don't think that locomotives do this much rocking, ride in one sometime. They, depending on the road, depends on how well the roadbed's been maintained, but yeah, they do a lot of moving. Right here past this this cut of tank cars right here. By the way, these are cars that have run over the hump through the classification yard, and they're pretty much ready to go. Yeah, it's this one, it's this next switch. So we'll stop short. Just kind of rocking back between one and idle. Switch here. See the points come over, and we'll go ahead and walk him on down. So this is where real railroading comes into play. The draft gear on these cars is designed to couple at speeds of 4 miles per hour or less. If you slam into them any faster than that, you can break something. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk this down like, let's pretend that I'm a conductor here or a brakeman or something, and we're going to be assembling a cut of cars together, and we've got an engineer that's up here on this engine. He's going to be coming down. We're going to do what's called car counts, which this one's going to be fairly easy because we've got a cut of cars right here beside us. Standard car count is 55 feet, which is pretty much a universal or an average length of a freight car. But you would walk him down with car counts here, and as we can tell, looking from here, we've got 1 car, 2 cars, 3 cars, 4 cars, 5 cars. So what you would do is you would say locomotive 3356, Mr. Elwood, switch is line for your movement. Come in and pick up this set of cars. Ease ahead about 5 cars or so. And he's going to start easing ahead. And basically what you would do is you'd walk him down. There we go. Didn't want to get moving there. 5 cards to a knuckle. And generally you would do this in half, so you would go 5, and you could either go 3 or 2.5. I'm going to call him 3 cars. And then for this one you can do 2 or 1.5. Go ahead and walk him down to 2. So 2 cars. One and a half. One car. Now half. 10 feet. 5, 4, 3, 2. That'll do. And then this is something I don't see a lot of people doing. We would stretch them out to make sure that the coupler made. So we'll put it in reverse and we would say stretch it out. Under notch 1, he'll knock his brakes off. And we got it. So we would put our brake on, center a reverser. That means he stopped, and I would call up to him. This is modern railroad now. I would call up to him and I'd say, Professor Oleander, requesting 3-step, go between line air. And we would go in between and line air. Now we're not going to line air on these. Actually, I tell you what, yeah we are, because I want to show you something. Actually, let me get back here for a minute. Make sure this one's closed. That was odd. I was wondering why that wasn't running. I could have sworn that I started that thing. How embarrassing. I thought for sure that I heard that engine running. Maybe it wasn't. Or we're going to need it here now. But yeah, what we would do is on a typical cut like this, we'd be working in between. There'd be an air hose dangling down in here. You'd line the air, or you would couple them together. There'd be an angle cock right here, and it would be open as it is. You would have to climb over the engine. We're going to climb through. And then there'd be an angle cock, which is right here. You would line the air in. Now, something that he's changed is something that happens in real life. If you open the angle cock too fast, you shoot the air. And what that is the pressure, the pneumatic control switch, which we tripped earlier by going into emergency, it has a flow meter on it. If the flow meter, if the airflow increases too fast over too short of a period of time, it will assume that the train has broken in half, that there's an open somewhere, and it'll actually make the train go into emergency. So what you would do is you click on your knuckle here, and there's a partially open. You would open that, you would hit partially open, and it would gradually let air run into the train. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go partially open. You see our flow meter here has gone up to 158, 59 cubic feet per minute. We're going to let that go for a few minutes. And just so I know how much air is coming through, we're going to throw an EOT on here. We'll probably just go ahead and leave it, to be honest. So now we're showing 2-3 pounds on the rear. And it's going to take a while. Excuse me, I had to get another drink. The air compressors on these locomotives are run off of the crankshaft. And if we hop up in here into the cab, in order to get, in order for them to pump fast, you have to run the locomotives up. So what we would do is we'll turn off the generator field, and then we'll run the locomotive up to notch 4. And what this does is the governor is telling the compressor to come on at about 130 psi or 135 psi. And if we look at our gauge right here, you'll see it goes down to about 130 and then it'll start pumping again. And the reason why we're running the RPMs up is because it helps the compressor keep up with the flow that's coming out of the main reservoir right now. So it'll come down and then it'll very quickly go back up to 140. If we're down to notch 1 when it comes on, you see it climbs much more slowly. As a matter of fact, it's barely able to keep up. It's holding there at about 135. If we go up to notch 1, see now it's starting to gain. It's gaining a little bit faster. Faster. And now it's able to keep up. That just keeps you from working your air compressor to death. Because if it's sitting there cycling, if it's sitting there on the pump cycle or charging cycle constantly, it gets hot and you can potentially damage stuff. So it's good to let it run up, do it to pump, let it cool off, pump, cool off, pump, cool off, because it's always turning. The pistons inside the air compressor are always turning. They've got a device on them called an unloader, and when the air pressure gets down to a certain point, at this point it's set to come on. In this particular locomotive, it is set to come on at 130 psi and it shuts off at 140. So there you see it cuts off, and then it runs down, and then once it gets down, and as I'm looking at this and I'm seeing that the airflow is slowing down, so what we're going to do is hop down here. We're going to go up here. We'll go ahead and open this. Now you see that the air pressure is draining off a little bit faster. And that shouldn't be doing that. Go ahead and turn that all the way But yeah, it takes a long time to do this. Um, so we're going to cheat. We're going to hit the F7 key, and that's going to reset all of our air. You notice that all of our reservoirs and everything are charged. So go ahead and bring this back down to idle. Now at this stage, the rules are that you would have to have the rear air pressure needs to be within 15 pounds of the feed valve setting. On this locomotive, the feed valve is set to 90 psi, which is what the train line is going to be charged to. We're at 90. The flow indicator has to be below 6, which is 60 cubic feet per minute. And what we would do is you'd make a full service reduction, which is a minimum 20 pounds. Come down to 70, which is right there. Wait for the brake pipe to catch up. You would wait the first minute to make sure that all the cars are charged. You would do a 20-pound reduction, wait another minute to make sure everything equalizes, and then on the third minute you would time. And what you're looking for is leakage. So you would watch this needle, and you don't look at this one. You don't look at this one. You look at this one. You look at this needle, and you watch it. You also look at the rear. So we're showing 70 pounds up here, and we're also showing 70 pounds on the rear. That means that we have an application on the train, or we have an application through the train. The bottom is showing an application as well. That means we have continuity from front to end. What you would do at this point, once you have verified that you have 70 pounds here and 70 pounds there, is this switch right here. You would switch it to out, which is actually switched to it, and there's no way to turn it. It would be over here in freight. You would switch this to out. What that does is that cuts out the brake stand, meaning that air from the equalizing reservoir is no longer supplying the train line. So you would watch the needle here on the train line, and you would see how much it drains down over the course of a minute. You're allowed a maximum of 5 psi over a 1 minute period. Anything above that, you have to inspect the train to find the leak. Usually on a good day, if you've only got about 2 pounds if you've only got a pound or two, it's actually pretty decent. But anything above 5, you have to walk the train and find where the leak is, because that can potentially make an application. So however much you're leaking down, that could be an application in the future. And the reason why you look at this one as opposed to this one is this needle should not move, because this needle is being regulated by the main reservoir. This is your feed. This is the feed setting. So this is the equalizing reservoir needle, and it's telling the brake pipe what pressure it needs to be set at. So when we go into release, you notice that the equalizing reservoir jumped up to 90, and then the brake pipe chased it. It went up to 92. And same thing, go to first service, and then the brake pipe follows it. So this needle tells this needle what it needs to do, or this gauge, or the equalizing reservoir tells the cars what they need to do. So the equalizing reservoir is sort of like the brain, and then the brake cylinders on the car are sort of the minions, or the appendages, or whatever you want to think of it about. But everything's controlled by the equalizing reservoir in terms of how brakes are applied when they're released. All the main reservoir does it's just an air supply. The actual physical application and releasing is done by the equalizing reservoir, and then all the brake pipe this is showing you the status of the train. So this is control, and then this is this is supply and control, and then this is status. If that makes any sense. Again, it's one of those things where you could spend a day talking about this stuff. So we'll go ahead and we'll leave everything applied for right now. Notice that our red light's on here. That's our parking brake. We're going to go ahead and knock that off. Why in God's name the slack run in? I have no idea. It shouldn't have, because we had brakes on the train. We only had 5 pounds, but whatever. Our Wilma up here, EOT is okay. That means we've got communication with it. There's actually a move meter on here. We'll look at that in just a minute. So we're actually ready to go. I'm going to ride the bottom here. Do like the real railroaders would do. Climb on. And I'm going to walk it back, so. Of course, I'm not going to go anywhere if I don't turn the generator field on. I told you guys. It's easy to forget. Alright, let's get out of here. Take it nice and easy, let everything stretch out. And there you see we have a move indication, means all the cars are moving. Go ahead and start easing off of the independent. Go all the way off. Go ahead and let everything stretch on out. Just a little bit of lag, and it's because of a couple things. One, it's because I'm recording, and two, it's because of just because there's a lot of assets being loaded. So we're going to go down this track right here with it, and sorry about that, I hit my microphone. Just kind of start getting everything under control here. Apply the brakes. Not really sure where that slack action came from, but it's all good. They're freight cars, they can handle it. By the way, this coupler strain right here, we're actually doing pretty good. You notice the frame rate's better on this side than it is looking back this way. I think this game could really use some optimizing in terms of graphics, but it's okay. Let's see, we should be getting close to the end here. cars are starting to float because we're going downhill, so I'm going to go ahead and come up to about 8 pounds down. That's 9. Go ahead and pull about 20 just to get them to stop. What do we need? 3 cars. Now the reason why I went ahead and stopped is just to make sure that I'm going to be able to get it under control. No one on the railroad ever got in trouble for going slow, because slower is safer. So what I'm going to do is, first I'm going to go back to idle. I'm going to go ahead and set the independent up. Knock off the brakes. Let everything kind of charge. You see that everything's building up very, very slowly, and the car should start rolling in. Notice that the brake pipe, this is on the locomotive, is already charged up to 90, but we still got a 7-pound reduction on the rear of the train. So we have to wait here for a second for everything to run in. And it may not run in, it might already be in. So we'll just go ahead and start easing off the brake cylinder. And we'll just kind of let gravity do its thing. There we go. I want everything to bunch up because it's going to be bunched up anyway once we start shoving back. Get it all bunched up. That's just some slack action. It sounds worse than it actually is. About 2 more cars. There's the point right there. We need a car and a half. One car. That'll do. I told that'll do after still rolling because it's going to take them a little bit to get stopped. So there come the lights. That might be why the lag is getting so bad, because the lights are getting ready to come on as well. There we go. We'll line this switch back. There you see it just turned red. Going down that track, it's clear all the way to the coast. So we'll go ahead and bring him forward. And I'm going to go ahead to notch 2. I have a rule of thumb: if you can't move a train in notch 2 in this game, then you're overloaded. The exception being on a hill or something like that. But if you can't get a train started in a yard with notch 2, then you got issues. You're overloaded. You need to put an extra locomotive on. You see we're rolling at a pretty good clip there, so go ahead and go up to 3. So yeah, I really like this game. really like the way the locomotives handle. There's a lot of options for it. The biggest upgrade that just came out was for the lights. You notice that these lights now cast shadows. That's part of the reason for the lag, is because there's a lot more shadows in here now. That's what I'm saying. This game could really use an optimization pass to make it run a little bit more smoothly. Because the computer that I'm on right now has a fairly decent graphics card and a decent amount of RAM. I'm up to about 16 gigs, and I have a 750 Ti NVIDIA card, so I shouldn't be having too much problems. And as you can see, I'm having some issues with lag. So a good optimization pass would be good for this game, but it's really nice. It really does feel like a railroad. Some of the things you can do, you can kick cars, you can run cars over the hump into the classification yard, you can do switching, like I said before, to go from Barstow to Needles, take you about 2.5–3 hours, and it's pretty realistic. And like the train handling, the slack action, the way that the dynamics work, it's pretty cool. I just love playing this game, and I've played it for hours on end. And it's fun because you can do some realistic switching, and you can do prototypical trains if you want to. And that's just not my thing. I'm not into running a train that's going to take 4 or 5 hours to run. Because to go from Barstow to the West Colton yard takes you about 3.5–4 hours. It's a pretty long run, and you've got to go down at about a 3% grade too, so it's always fun. Some nice sounds to go with it as well. The thing I love about it is the engine sounds. They're really bassy, and it actually sounds like a big engine, like they're supposed to, because these engines are fairly loud. And these SD40s, they really sit down and work, so they'll shake the ground. Come the brothers. I'm going to spot this cut deep enough so that I can put on a load. I can put on a couple of locomotives. And very quickly, let me copy the current I've got in here. Remove these 2 locomotives. 7293. I want to have 3. That means I need to put 7293 loaded. I want to have about 3.5 HPT. I'm holding the engine in notch 1 just to make sure everything stays bunched, and then I've put a 10-pound reduction on it. Now I'm gonna go back to idle. So yeah, what I was looking at is the weight, and I'm gonna assume that this train's gonna be loaded. Matter of fact, I am going to load it right now. So click on it and fully load. And I can look at my train stats and see that 7293, which is what we were looking at. 7293. So now I need to figure out how many horsepower. I want to have at least 3.5 horsepower per ton. So I have the option between a couple of freight locos, and one of the nice things is you notice that I had the train selected, and I went over here and I said copy to current, and then I just took out the locomotives that I've got, so that tells me how much this train weighs right now, and I can come over here to the freight loco list, and I can pick which locos that I want to put on it. Like I can just tack them onto the back if I want to. So one's going to give me 0.6, 2, 3, 4, 5. I figured it was going to be about 5. So this train's going to have a DPU, just because I'm going to need to put 5 units on here. I can actually take one of these and remove it and put an SD40 on it, and that puts me exactly at 3.5. So what have I got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 locomotives. I could do it with 3, but it just 3.1 is probably going to be enough. For needles, yeah, 3.1 will be fine. It's going to be a little bit slower once we get over the grade, but it should hold track speed fairly well. So what is it? That's 5 locomotives, so I'm going to split that up. We'll have 3 locomotives on the head end, and then we'll have 2 locomotives on the bottom. So yeah, we'll do that. So we've got a 10-pound reduction, and we'll very quickly run up there and grab a couple locomotives. Very important that you close the angle cock on the engine. This one can stay open because all that'll do is just set the train into emergency. Set the handbrake on this car because once we pull away from it, it'll default to all of the brakes being on. Once we've done all that, we will put the engine in reverse. A couple of toots. Go to 1. Knock the brake off. And, like a dummy, open. And the train goes into emergency. You always forget something. I'm thinking about 9 different things at one time. Actually, you know what? We're not going to put power on this locomotive. There's no real need to. We'll just go ahead and put these guys to bed. And I'm going 20 miles an hour. It's alright. I own the railroad. But yeah, like I was saying with our calculator right here, this is something else that was added fairly recently to the train maker upper placer there window. And so you're able to put your cars. It tells you how many you've got, your locomotives, your cars, totals, and then your empty weight and your loaded weight, and you can figure out how many locomotives that you need to put on there. If this was a fully loaded train, this was a fully loaded train, it would weigh 7,293 tons. Depending on where you are, now if we were going to take this train to Bakersfield, I would say take it up to 4. If we were going to take this train from Barstow to Bakersfield, I would probably put this at 4 HPT. And the reason for it is because Bakersfield has got some very, very grueling grades. They're long grades, it's going up a mountain. It's very hard to maintain your speed because you'll be in notch 8 running 30 miles an hour. So I tend to put more locomotives on there than I need to, and again, that's not prototypical, but I don't have 4 hours to spend going around a mountain at 35 miles an hour, you know, in notch 8 and not able to get anywhere. So it's my railroad and I run it the way I want to. So if I need to put 5 engines on it to get it over the grade, then I'm going to put 5 engines on it to get over the grade. That's just how it works, you know. But hope you enjoyed this. This is Run 8 Train Simulator, as I've said before. This is only a small snippet of what you're able to do. That's just a little bit of switching. But we might do some stuff going over the hump. I think I've showed that in another video. One of the things that I want to do is take a train over the line. And if we do, we won't do the Needles route. We'll actually go to Bakersfield. I kind of like that route. I haven't run that route in a while, but this is the run to Bakersfield. Barstow is down in this area, and I mean it's uphill. That's why there's so many sidings right here. These are to get out of the way or to let a faster train go by or something like that. But there's a couple of tunnels on this one. You know, there's 10 tunnels. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is in there somewhere. 7 and 8. But yeah. And then plus we'll be going through the Mojave Yard, and as you can see, I've got some stuff in the Mojave now. So with that being said, I am Professor Oleander. This was Run 8 Train Simulator, and I really hope you guys give it a try. It is worth the money if you don't get anything but the base route. I know it's $40, but if you're big into train simulators like I am, or if you just like railroads in general, this game is worth the cost. There's a little bit of a steep learning curve once you get the keyboard controls under your belt, because the controls for this one are totally different from any other train simulator you might have ever run. But you know, if you run it a couple times, I mean, it's second nature to me. I know which buttons I need to push and when, and it actually makes a little bit more sense. One thing I didn't mention is there is a device called a Rail Driver. This game is compatible with Rail Driver. It's not joystick, but it's a little console that you can use. They're fairly expensive. I think they're about $200 or something like that. But it's a little console. It looks like a little control stand out of a Dash 9. It's one of those table mount deals with the brake lever and throttle and a reverser position. If that floats your boat, this game supports it. It's compatible with it. It doesn't take much to set it up. But anyway, I'm going to end it right there. We'll do another video. Probably take a train, like I said, up to Bakersfield and have a good old time. So take care. Have a link to the game in the description below. So we'll see you next time.